we're going to start with their accessibility checking tool that's built into every modern version of Microsoft products. That includes PowerPoint, Excel, includes all these other things. So if you go to the Review tab, you're going to see a button that says Check Accessibility. And it's going to bring up a little window. And it's going to give me a few issues that it has with my inaccessible document. So I can click on each one and see missing alternative text. Well, this picture is missing alternative text. Which picture is it? It's that one. So I can see that this picture doesn't have alternative text on it. How do I fix that? Right-click on the image. Oops. Right-click on the image and say Edit Alt Text. So I say Edit Alt Text, and I can put in some alt text. And notice as I fix that error, as soon as I fixed it, I put something in there, that line item just dropped off of my accessibility checker. Now this will tell you, again, this will tell you if you have alt text on an image, but it won't tell you if the alt text is good. For that, you have to look at each image. And the cool thing here is, even if without the accessibility checker, I've opened up the alt text, I click on the next image, and it's there. So I can just kind of go down my page, look at all the images, and see what the alt text is for each. Another one that you're going to see, though, now, which is good and bad, is Microsoft will generate an alt text for you. And it will try and guess. And it will show up in the accessibility checker that, hey, these are alt texts that we generated, you should look at them. I have yet to get Microsoft to get one right. In all the things I've tested, it's never been correct. So I don't know what their algorithm is. It's not very good. So is it better than nothing? Maybe, but maybe not. It actually, nothing could be better than something that's incorrect or misleading. I talked about null alt text before, about making this image this is just a purely decorative image. Well, you can do that too. You can just say, mark as decorative. I'll take the third image here and generate a description for me. Let's see what happens. A close-up of a guitar. All right, that one is actually decent, except it's two guitars, not a guitar. And specifically, it's the Beatles guitars. And an amp. So it's close. It's better than nothing on that one. That one actually did pretty good. All right, so we fixed all three of my alt texts. So now if I go back to Review, check accessibility, that one is taken off the list. So now it's showing up here, though, that, oh yeah, you generated one. You should go check it. Image or object not in line. This is a tricky one. I have floated this image to the right. Oh, come on. I've done the wrap text thing. The problem with this is, where does this picture get read in the content? Is it before the paragraph? Is it after the paragraph? Is it in the middle of the paragraph? You don't know. So unless you actually use JAWS to read it, you're not actually even going to know. So Microsoft used to just say this was a warning. They've actually changed it in the recent version to say this is an error. So wrapping text around images, unfortunately for you, is not going to work anymore. So inline with text, and Microsoft being Microsoft has decided to throw my stuff underneath there. I would then go and fix that in other ways. Hard to read text contrast. Oh, look at that. I made something very light gray. It's the page numbers. Again, hard to read. I mean, I can barely read that from here. So I'm going to want to fix that. I'm going to want to go in here and say, all right, what color is this going to be? Well, let's make it darker. There we go. It's fixed. Yes?
Does it pick up like watermark kind of the same way? Because that being like a background picture illustrated?
Watermarks are really tricky. If you use them in the way that using Microsoft's watermark feature, they will be read correctly. If you just put a picture in the background, they will not. And so you don't want to do that. But watermarks do get tricky. And then you have to worry about with watermarks, if I put a watermark back here, how's the contrast between this text and where the watermark is? Did we just violate the text contrast? And I don't know for a fact whether or not Microsoft would pick up on that, because that's getting into some really tricky programmatic stuff. I'm going to guess that it wouldn't. So my first advice is don't use watermarks. If you don't have to, don't use watermarks, all right? Just don't. But you'll need to test, and you'll need to check it to see if it meets the right standards. I've got other ones, though. So I'm going to go down here to this one here and see what are we talking about here. All right. The albums in green are my favorite. What's wrong with this picture? Color. The only way of identifying this as my favorite albums, the White Album, classic, the only way to know that is I've used color. I've used color alone for meaning. It doesn't say I can't use color for meaning. It says I can't use color alone for meaning. So, oops. Oh, I'm still in the footer, that's why. I've just solved that. Now I have a key that identifies which things are going to be my favorite albums and which ones are not. So as long as there is a secondary indication, then you're fine. So color is, again, color is fine. Use color, as long as it meets color contrast ratios. Use color alone, don't do that. Now this color here isn't quite dark enough, so I would probably want to darken it a bit. That looks better on the computer screen than it does on the TV screen there, but I want to find a different color that meets the color contrast. All right, so that's what the accessibility checker picked up on, right? It didn't pick up on everything, though. And the biggest one is structure. And I can check the structure of my page by going to View and turning on the navigation page. And it tells me that I have no headings in my document. What do you mean? I've got a heading right there. That's a heading, right? No, that's a paragraph that you made big and bold. It's not actually a heading. How do you do headings in Word? These tools up here, these are not just make it visually different. These are give it structure. So if I want to make this a heading, I'm going to say, OK, I want that to be heading 1. And I want that to be heading 2. And that's a heading 2, because that's also underneath that. This is also a heading 2. But this is a heading 3. It's underneath that. So I'm creating structure, and I can just see it right over here that I'm building a structure to my page. I'm going to go ahead and build it all out. That should be a heading 3. All right, so now I've built structure. Here's the part where I tell you what to do, and it changes your world forever. These styles, these will save you time. If you're not already using styles in Microsoft Word, you should be. Okay? Because here's the deal. This is a heading 2. I don't like how this heading 2 is formed. I don't like the way it looks. Modify. You know what? I want this to be in red. I want it to be, want some more space after it. And I want there to be a border on the bottom. They're all done. All of them. Every single one on the page. How many of you have spent time making a style for a heading and then copying and pasting that style to every one on your page? How many of you have done that? Come on, raise your hand. I've done it too. I don't do it anymore because I use styles for that. So this not only gave me the structure that I wanted, it also just made this a lot easier for me to edit in the future. Here's even a cooler part. You can take those styles and save it as a template. And then the next time you need a press release that you're going to write and put out, use the template, and you have all your styles already. You don't have to remember that your headlines are supposed to be 14-point bold. You've got a style already built for that. You'll have consistency in your design and in the documents that you produce by using styles. There's styles for headings, there's styles for lists, there's styles for paragraphs, there's styles for inline. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with styles. That one just saved you several hours a week, right? So don't worry, accessibility isn't all bad. It's not all just work you have to do. Some of this stuff is going to save you time. So what am I going to say here? What's wrong here? Yeah, click here. To read the Beatles Wikipedia page, click here. I mean it, never ever write the words click here again. If you didn't already know, Control K brings up the link tool. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to remove it. Remove link. Okay, because I'm going to rewrite this. Now it's a lot better, right?
Nice.
It makes sense. You can read it. It's more accessible, and it's just better. The other one that you shouldn't be doing, and there's definitely times where you can't get away with it without doing it this way, but doing this. Using the URL as the link text. What's going to happen when the screen reader gets there? It's going to read every letter. Now, if that's a really long URL, it's going to get really annoying really fast. Okay? Yes, there's times when you have to do it this way, especially if this is a document that's going to get printed. and you need to have that URL on there. But if it's a document that people are reading, or if it's a web page, you want to, you don't want to do that. Okay? You want your link to be clear. The exception is like email addresses. Put in an email address. That everybody gets that one. All right, that's, but they're also pretty short. Or if you have a company website address, google.com. Okay, fine, that's, just the website. But if you have a really long URL, don't do that. All right, so that's links. We'll just leave it like that. What else do we have on here? Ooh, what's this? This is a table. Except, if I look at it, it's actually not a table. There's no relationship between those different parts. And as a horrible thought, I've used the space bar to line those things up. Not even tabs, I use the space bar. All right, I'm going to take off my accessibility hat for a second. How many spaces after a period? 1. It is 1. It is only 1. If you are hitting the space bar more than once in a row, you're doing something wrong. But I can't remember to do that. Replace, space, 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 replace all. Done. I just solved all my double spaces after a period. Did you know you could find and replace spaces?
No. How
Nope.
did you just do that again?
Replace,
Yes, please.
replace, space, 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 replace all. Now I had a bunch of spaces in a row down here, so it's gonna keep finding them. So I'll do it until it stops doing it, because it's still finding more here. So I'm going to go in and put these into tabs for a second to do the part that I'm going to do. And really, if you are hitting any key on the keyboard, except for a letter or a number, more than once in a row, you're probably doing something wrong. You shouldn't be using multiple tabs. That's what you have tab stops for, a single tab. Microsoft actually used to mark that as incorrect. It doesn't anymore. Same thing after a paragraph. Why are you hitting 2 returns after every paragraph? Don't do that. Change the style to make it so that there's space after the paragraph. Then you can control it too. So if I'm going to go over here, I'm going to bring up normal. Here's my normal style. I'm going to change it. Modify normal. Format. Paragraph. Oh, there's 15 points of space after every paragraph. That's too much. I'm going to take it down to 10 points of space. There we go. That's a little tighter and a little better looking. And again, I just did that in the entire document, not just this one instance. And if I had done that correctly from the beginning and I had a template, I wouldn't even have to have done that much, because it's already right. OK, so I have a table here. Yes?
Kevin, what did you click on to bring up the styles?
Oh, this little button down here brings up the Styles pane.
OK,
Any of these little buttons down here in Word brings up that tool.
thank you.
If you're on a Mac, it looks a little different, but it functions pretty much the same way. But it does, you get there a different way. Yeah?
Does Microsoft recognize different formats like APA or scientific notation?
Not natively as far as I know, but I think there are some plugins that you can do for Microsoft for APA style and stuff like that.
Okay.
All right, so I have a table here of information, but it's not set up as a table. So I am going to go and say, where is it on here? Layout, no, insert, table. I'm going to convert text to table. And look at how it broke it up. It broke it up wrong. Because I said find every tab. Well, I used multiple tabs in spots. That's no good. Undo. I want one tab at each spot. And it's important because if you think it was bad for you in that table, well, if you're using a screen reader, it's going to be even worse. Let's try it now. All right, we got it, but there was an extra tab at the end, so we'll just delete that row. Now I have a table. We're better, we're not there yet though, for this table. I'm going to go to Table Properties, and I'm going to go in, whoops, wrong thing. So this brings up our table properties. And there's a couple things anytime we're doing a data table that we're going to want to do in here. One of them, which interestingly enough, is called Alt Text. Tables really need to have a description of what the table is. All right. I've added an alt text to this table. If you're in HTML and you're writing a web page, it's a caption instead of an alt text. That's really what more this is. It's really a caption, not a alt text. But Microsoft has a different terminology for it. But it does the same thing. I'm also going to go over here to row. I'm in the first row. And I'm going to go here where it says repeat as header row at the top of each page. And I'm going to click that. I know this table isn't that big, but I'm going to tell it that this is a header row. And what that does is it says, well, this column now are the people. This column now is the main instrument. So when I'm using a screen reader and I am in this cell, I can get it to tell me that this is Paul McCartney main instrument bass. Because I've identified the headers. I've identified here are those bits that associate with this cell. I mean, visually, this is really obvious, right? You all got it visually. But from a programmatic point of view, you want to do tables. You need to tell it that this is the bit that's the header part.
Did you make both those headers the same header number, like header 1 or header 2?
For these.
Yes.
In the table, I just told it it's a table cell, the table header, which is different than the
Styles. Okay.
the header styles. They are identified in JAWS slightly differently. I could make this a header inside of here, but I probably don't want to do that. I mean, legally it's possible, but now you're kind of confusing things. For most tables. One of the things, though, that I am not doing here, which I know all of you are guilty of at some point or another. I'm guilty of it too, I used to do it. I'm not using this table to lay out my page. I'm using this table to show tabular data. Columns, rows, I'm using this like Excel, right? Don't use tables to lay out your content. And this goes for web pages as well. You shouldn't be using tables to, back in the old days, that was the only thing we had to lay out complex websites. We don't anymore. We have other stuff now. We have CSS. We have all sorts of other things to lay out content. So don't use tables just to lay out your page. OK, so we've got our document. I'm going to run the review, check accessibility again. Yep, the ones, pretend I fixed those. And then it'll say, yay, you fixed everything. Yay, life is good. There's one other that Microsoft doesn't catch. And I don't know why it doesn't do this. It should catch it it should flag it with the accessibility checker, and it just doesn't. And that's what's called the meta information for this document. Meta, M-E-T-A. There's, if I go over here to File, and on the Info tab, you'll see over here in the Properties, this is the information about this document that's not in the document. It's the meta information. And if you're doing web pages, there's meta information in web pages as well. The one that's really important here is the title. And that gets exported out as the title of the document. So it's important that you put that one in. The other ones are good too. The tags, the comments, especially if you want to make this document searchable on the web. You're going to make a PDF file and you're going to make it searchable. Tags and comments, those are important. So put in those. That's not an accessibility thing though. That's just a good design thing. All right? Okay. Now, I want to take this Word document, my glorious Word document, and I want to turn it into a PDF file, because I want to give it to people. I bet you all have to do that at some point. There are multiple ways to export this document and make it into a PDF. The least accessible way, and some of you are guilty of this, is printing it out and then putting it on a scanner. Don't do that. Oh, but I need to have this signature on this document. So what? You still have to have an accessible version of it. Now, you might have to have because of record retention laws and stuff, you might have to have a version of it that is scanned, posted up with the signatures on it as it was signed. Okay, but you still have to have that content in an accessible way too. So generally what I tell people is, well, make a version of it, scan just the signature, put that in as a picture with an alt text of who the signature was. Now you're good, right? So when you have a PDF file, there's a quick and easy check for it. Can you select the text and copy it and paste it into another document? If you can, then it was not printed and scanned. If you can't, you know that that's bad. What about old documents that are all scans? What are you going to do about them?
We're archiving.
That's a good suggestion. So again, school of medicine, School of Medicine has a magazine called Synapse. Some of you may get it, I don't know. And we had our archive of issues all the way back to 1986 on our website. And those really old ones were all just scans of the issues. They took the pages and they scanned them and put them online. And we were going back and forth about how are we going to solve this? How are we going to go back to all these old magazines? We don't have the source files anymore. All we have are these scans. Are we going to retype them? What are we going to do?
Take them down.
Well, I looked at the Google Analytics for the page, and nobody was accessing them. Nobody cared about the issue from 1986. Nobody downloaded it. Nobody. In a whole year, nobody downloaded it. Why is it online? Doesn't need to be. What I ended up doing actually was putting up a page. I retyped the table of contents, add the cover, the table of contents, and then a note that said, if you want this, send us an email and we'll send it to you. And then if you needed an accessible version, then we would go and make that issue an accessible version of either the whole issue or just the article in question. Right? We never even had anybody do that. So I used to tell everybody, you have some content, throw it up on your website. Go ahead. Just let it sit up there. It's not hurting anything, right? No, now it's a liability. So again, a lot of you are going to have record retention law that you have to pay attention to, so you might have to have something well, these minutes from this meeting need to be up there for 7 years. On year 8, though, why don't you get rid of them? All right, they don't need to be there anymore. No joke, I took down a PowerPoint presentation that had been turned into a PDF that was on the School of Medicine website about Medicaid billing in 1993. I did that 2 years ago. Okay, so first of all, it didn't need to be there. Secondly, it's not accurate anymore. That information was wrong at that point. And in 1993, it was accurate. So why is it still up there? Well, we had it, so we put it up on the web. No, don't do that anymore. So think about your documents. Don't just throw everything on the web anymore. Again, if you have record retention laws that you have to pay attention to, talk to your lawyer and find out what those are. But don't just put everything up there on the web anymore. Okay, so that's one way to get a PDF. There's another way, which is to print to PDF. That's slightly better than scanning it, but not much. All right, so don't do that. If you have Adobe Acrobat Pro installed, you have this option. But for most of you, you're going to go up here to Save As. And I'm going to find a good place for it. I'm going to put it on my desktop. And I'm going to save it as type PDF. So I'm saving it as a PDF rather than printing it to PDF. That's very important. I haven't looked at these in a while. There's a couple things that you're going to want to include in it on your options, and you only have to actually specify these things once. After that, it's all good. Document structure tabs for accessibility. That's an important one. So that structure, those headings that we created, will be exported. So make sure that that's checked. If you really want to do it right, you would also check this one that says PDFA compliant, but it will change your design. It will change some of your layout. It will swap your fonts out for more standardized fonts. So everything will become Helvetica or Arial. So it's good to do that, but honestly, I don't actually do that one. Yes?
So you said the font that made me think. I know a lot of fonts I can't read half of them anyway, the curvy ones and stuff. So is Arial probably a safe, good font? Because Times New Roman was kind of a safety one.
Yeah, Times, Arial, those standard fonts that are on everybody's computer are generally pretty good. Strangely enough, there's everyone talks bad about Comic Sans, but for some people that's actually easier to read. So don't just dismiss it. I wouldn't use it myself, but it's still an okay font.
We use Cambria a lot too.
Was that?
Was it Cambria?
Yeah, Cambria is the Microsoft Word one. That's their default font now. And it's pretty accessible. It's pretty clean and good. Yeah, fonts definitely gets into this whole other area of design that we can't really get into with only 20 minutes left. Yes.
So when you talk about archiving, how much data going from old Microsoft product into a new PDF format would be lost in a conversion?
From an old version,
Yeah.
Generally not much. There wouldn't be much lost. But it would be good to bring it into the new version of Microsoft Word and save it as, because then you can run the accessibility checker. Okay. It has to be a docx file, by the way, to run the accessibility checker. It won't do it on a doc file, but that's just an easy save as current version. So if that accessibility checker comes up and says, I can't run on this file format, that's what's happening. It has to be the newest file format version. Okay, so I've got this all set up. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save my PDF. All right, so now I've got my accessible PDF. That was doing it from a source material, right? That was doing it from, I had Microsoft Word, and I've made it accessible there, and then I exported. You can, however, do it another way, which is to take a PDF file and use Acrobat Pro to make it accessible. And often you're going to use both tools. And sometimes it's just you're going to run it through Acrobat and say, well, what's accessible, what's not, and see stuff, and then, oh, well, I'm going to go back to Word, change it again, and export it again. That works. You know, often you'll have to fix something more than once, especially when you're getting started at this. All right, this becomes very old hat. You know, I had to print out something, you know, to put on a wall somewhere at my church, and I made the document accessible because it's just habit to do it. You know, I did all the things. I put alt text on the image, even though I was just going to print it out and put it on the wall. You know, so it just becomes habit. So Acrobat Pro, if you don't have it, you should get it. Get your agency to buy it for you. Has an accessibility checking tool. So I'm going to run the full check. And two issues. Logical read order needs checking. Yeah, you need to run it and see, does it make sense? And the color contrast needs a manual check. But it didn't fail anything else, didn't fail my alt text, because I put one on. The other one was Microsoft Word generated, and the third one, I marked it as decorative, so it ignored it. But a real cool tool here in Acrobat is read out loud.
The Beatles. History. The Beatles were an English rock band, formed in Liverpool in 1960, who became one of the most commercially successful and critically acclaimed acts in the history of popular music.
So, and that's actually built into the reader version as well. It'll read your whole document for you, kind of like JAWS does. So you can check the order of things really easily with that. It's not quite the same as JAWS, but it's a really good close version of it. And you can start it at certain spots, stop it at certain spots, so you can hear things over and over again to see what it's like. So be sure and do that as well. We don't have time to get into it, but there's a whole thing with making your PDFs fillable forms as well. And there's a bunch of tools with that as well. So be sure and pay attention to that. If I go prepare form, start. Oh, it identified my table as form components, interestingly enough. But anyways, you can work with the tools in Acrobat Pro. Again, a lot of great tools in there to do stuff. Any questions about any of that?
I have a question about the picture, the first picture you changed that's right under the history.
Yeah.
Couldn't you, in the PDF form, adjust the reading order so that, and leave that off to the side?
Yeah.
Because right now it's hidden, so you really don't even see that.
Right, so with the accessibility tool, I can go in here to reading order and restructure everything. So here's figure 2, and I can change where it is, I can change what it is, I can actually mark it as decorative in here. So I can make all of these adjustments to the document that I did in Word. I can also do them here in Acrobat. This is harder, though, to do it this way, to come about it after the document's been created. It's easier if you do it from the source document. And this is true, too, for things like if you're doing InDesign or any of these other programs to generate this stuff, because it's not all just Microsoft Word, So you can go through here and really change things. You can change the alt text on the images and all sorts of other stuff. And you can also look at edit PDF. I can go in here and edit the content. Again, this is all in the Pro version. So
then with that image, technically I could leave it on Word, I could leave it as a wrap text. And
Right.
just have it read it.
and then go in here and adjust it and say, okay, make sure. And you know, it's telling you it's an error, but it may not be an error, depending on how you've placed it and exactly where you've placed it. So it's really a thing of, well, run it through JAWS and see where, or put it in a PDF and have it read out loud. Where does it tell you that image? Is it in the middle of a sentence? Then it's wrong. If it's at the beginning of a paragraph, okay, that's not so bad. You know, that's probably makes sense. So again, testing it instead of just looking to see, well, did it meet the compliance? No, we need to test. Yeah.
I was wondering, are there similar accessibility tools in Google Docs?
No,
I don't think so.
not yet. I wouldn't be surprised if they have them, though, at some point. But currently, Microsoft is leading the way on this for these kinds of documents. And it used to be that it was only in the PC version of Word, but now it's in both Mac and PC. They're both identical. A couple years ago, they made both versions feature equivalent. They were kind of leapfrogging each other. The Mac version would get a bunch of new stuff, and then the PC version would get a bunch those things, plus in some other new stuff, and now they're just at the same level all the time. All right, so what I just said, the accessibility checker. There are limitations with it, as you know. It's not going to catch everything. It's not going to catch that I wrote a bad alt text. It's not going to catch that I put something in color, and that was the only way it's conveying meaning. This is the same thing with site improve. It's not going to catch those same kinds of things, because it can't. It can't know that your alt text is bad. It just knows whether or not there's alt text or not. Structure. Did you make your headings headings? Did you make your lists lists? Did you make your tables tables? There was a list on that Word document, too, that I was supposed to change. It was just a bunch of paragraphs with number 1, number 2, number 3. I forgot one. Color. Don't rely on color for meaning. Make sure your images have alt text. Make sure your links make sense. And make sure you export to PDF rather than print to PDF. And make sure you edit that meta information, the title especially. Yeah?
Can you go over what were the boxes you need to make sure were checked on that when you export from Word to PDF? You said there were 2 boxes.
The main one was the one that said include the structure for accessibility. There's a thing that says include structure for something, something, something for accessibility. Okay. Make sure that that's checked. The other one is the PDF-A format. If you really want to do it right, you should do it in a PDF-A format. But again, like I said, it changes your fonts. It makes them standardized fonts. So Acrobat Pro, don't scan your documents. Use their accessibility tool because it's a good thing, and it catches things that the Word version doesn't. There's also, if you're doing forms, there's a form tool, there's an edit tool. If you want some other tools for checking your PDF, there is a great tool called Pack3, which is a free downloadable piece of software that you run on your computer. It's only Windows, I believe. And it really dives into your PDF files. A little too much, I think, in some cases. If you really want to make your PDFs accessible, that's the tool for checking. There's also an online checker. The European Internet Inclusion Initiative, or EIII, they have a PDF checker online. So just search for EIII PDF checker, and you'll find it. Okay, you now all know this stuff. The main thing I'm doing with these when I do this kind of lecture is just to raise awareness that this is a thing. I still get so many people when I tell them I'm an accessibility consultant for digital stuff that they say, I didn't know that was a thing. I'd never thought about it. I mean, it's a common response that I get. So I am empowering you now all to be ambassadors of digital accessibility. Tell people about what you know. So spread the word. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell everybody you can. Digital accessibility is a thing, and you need to be paying attention to it. Check the entire user experience too. I have a couple stories of this. We worked with a financial institution for their this new online service they were going to do, and we made their website fully accessible. This new online tool. Interestingly, one of our testers, the blind user who was doing the testing, was a customer of that bank. So he decided, all right, I'm going to go sign up for the service, right? So the first step was to call on the phone and set up your account. So as a blind user, he had his 16-digit bank code. That's the first thing they're going to ask you. What's your account number? Anybody here has their bank number memorized? No. So he had it on a text file, and he had JAWS up and ready to read it to him. So he's on the phone with the agent, and the agent asks, okay, what's your account number? And so he hits JAWS. The agent says, is there someone else in the room with you? No, this is JAWS. I'm blind and I can't see. So he does it again. The agent says, I'm sorry, there's someone else in the room with you. I have to disconnect this call. Click. Because you can't be doing this with someone else prompting you to do this, sign up for the financial stuff. That's their policy. So it was great that we made their website accessible, but as a blind user, you couldn't actually activate an account. The other one I'm going to mention, again, have you been following what's going on with Mackey Stadium? Anybody?
The new housing?
No, the Mackey Stadium. A few years ago, they spent a lot of money to make the Mackey Stadium accessible. And now they're spending a lot of money to make Mackey Stadium accessible. Because where the wheelchairs could go, you can't see the field. So it's great that you can now get there and actually be there, but you can't actually see the game. There's also one elevator, one, for the skyboxes, for the caterers, for people in a wheelchair. One of the people who was in a wheelchair was saying it takes 45 minutes to get up the elevator because there's only one elevator. So they did all this work, and ultimately they made parts accessible, but not the entire flow. The whole thing isn't accessible. You can't say that you have an accessible elevator if it takes you 45 minutes to get it because you're waiting in line. So check your entire user experience. And I got a picture there. That's great that you put in a curb cut, but you didn't do the other part. So the other thing is focus on progress, not perfection. Here's where I give you some relief back, okay? Don't get so caught up in the idea, well, I have to make this whole thing accessible. And that's just too much work. Don't get caught up in that. Tomorrow, make the alt text on your homepage better. Just do that, nothing else. The next day, check the alt text on some of your other pages. The day after that, check to see if you can navigate with the keyboard. Progress, not perfection. This is a process, not a project. You just have to learn to do this from day one for everything. become part of your natural workflow. You are thinking accessible from every moment of the day. And then it's not a big daunting task anymore. It's just, oh, well, this is what I do. I add alt text to images. Boom, I'm done already. And then finally, I have to say this. There is a point where you do have to hire somebody. We are not the only company that does this. There's 3 large companies. We're one of them. We have about 120 people that do testing, like myself, at our company. There's a point though where it makes sense to hire somebody in, and that's where we come in. Or one of our competitors. There's also a whole bunch of small companies, with just like 5 people. And those are great too. So do think, you hit a point where it's just going to be financially makes sense for you to hire somebody. We work for a lot. We have, like I said, over 1,000 clients. And those range from little tiny design agencies to, if you look at the Fortune 500 list, the top 20, half of those are our clients. So we work with a lot of different people. So that's my only bit of sales pitch that I do, because I am not in sales and I don't want to be in sales and I have nothing to do with sales. Just give me my projects and I'll work on it. But there is a point where you do need to hire somebody and think about that as well. It does become cost effective to have somebody else be your expert.